My brothers and sisters, history is being rewritten before our very eyes. For centuries, the West built its power on the raw veins of Africa, draining our gold, our uranium, our cotton, our oil, while leaving us in hunger, in darkness, in poverty. They told us we were weak. They told us we could not stand without them. They told us our destiny was to dig the soil and watch them feast on the harvest. But today, three nations have broken the silence. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger have risen as one and declared to the world, no more. No more will our resources leave our soil untransformed. No more will our minerals fuel their factories while our children sit in the dust. No more will our wealth light up Paris and Washington while Ouagadougou, Bamako, and Niamey remain in darkness. This is not just a policy. This is not just an announcement. This is revolution. This is a thunderclap that has shaken the palaces of Europe and the boardrooms of America. For the first time in generations, Africa has spoken with a voice that cannot be ignored, a voice that does not beg, a voice that does not bow, a voice that says, "The era of exploitation is over." And the West trembles, because they know what this means. They know that their factories, their economies, their comfort have always depended on the free flow of African wealth. They know that without Africa, the engines of their power grind to a halt, and they fear, because if 3 nations can stand, then 10 will follow. If 10 can rise, then 54 will unite. This moment, my people, is not about the past, it is about the future. A future where Africa controls her own destiny. A future where our children inherit dignity, not despair. A future where no African leader signs away the soul of his nation for crumbs. A future where the wealth of our soil builds African schools, African industries, African armies, African dreams. The West is collapsing not because we destroyed them, but because we finally stood up. The world will never be the same again. My brothers and sisters, sons and daughters of Africa, and all who listen with open hearts and searching minds across the world, today I rise to speak of a storm that has broken upon the global order, a storm not of destruction but of renewal, not of chaos but of justice. It is a storm unleashed by 3 nations that the world once dismissed, 3 nations that the arrogant powers once called small, weak, and dependent. Yet today Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger stand together with voices thunderous as the Sahelian winds, declaring to the West and to the entire planet, no longer shall we be plundered, no longer shall we be reduced to mere suppliers of raw wealth while our people languish in poverty, no longer shall we accept the chains of extraction. Without transformation, the ban has been declared. Raw exports from our lands will no longer flow into the mouths of empires that feed on our misery. No longer shall our gold, our uranium, our cotton, our oil, our lithium, and our countless treasures depart unprocessed, unrefined, and undervalued, enriching others while starving us. The gates have closed, the chains have been broken, and a new chapter begins. My brothers and sisters, let the world understand the gravity of this moment. For centuries, the story of Africa has been the same story told with different faces and different accents. Our lands blessed with riches beyond measure, our rivers flowing with potential, our soil brimming with fertility, our mines glittering with minerals sought by every empire, and yet our people kept poor, our youth kept desperate, our nations kept dependent. Why? Because from the very beginning, the West saw us not as partners but as reservoirs, reservoirs of wealth to be drained, reservoirs of labor to be exploited, reservoirs of submission to be maintained. They took our gold to build their banks. They took our cotton to clothe their industries. They took our uranium to light their cities and power their weapons. They took our oil to fuel their engines. And in return, what did we receive? Chains of debt, crumbs of charity, and the hollow praise of being developing nations while they grew fat on our sweat. But today, the script has changed. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger have declared to the world that we are no longer reservoirs. We are no longer silent suppliers. We are no longer slaves to global markets controlled in Paris, London, Washington, and Brussels. We are sovereign nations, and sovereignty means control of our resources. Sovereignty means deciding what leaves our soil and in what form. Sovereignty means refusing to sell our treasures for pennies. While buying back finished goods for fortunes, sovereignty means dignity, and dignity cannot be traded. The West did not see this coming. They thought our leaders would always bow. They thought our people would always accept. They thought our armies would remain divided, our economies fragmented, our voices muted. But they were wrong. From Ouagadougou to Bamako to Niamey, the drums of unity have sounded, and the sons of Sankara, Modibo, Keita, and Seni have risen. The Sahel has spoken, and the world must listen. Brothers and sisters, do you realize the scale of what has been done? Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger together hold some of the most critical resources of the modern age. Niger's uranium has fueled the lights of Paris for decades. Mali's gold has fattened the vaults of Europe while its people lived in struggle. Burkina Faso's cotton has clothed millions abroad while its farmers fought for survival. But today, those veins of wealth are no longer open pipelines for Western empires. Today, those veins are redirected to nourish our own people. Imagine the shock in Western capitals. Imagine the panic in their parliaments. Imagine the desperation of their corporations. They awake to discover that the minerals they once took for granted will no longer arrive at their ports unchallenged. The gold shipments are halted. The uranium trains no longer depart. The cotton bales do not move. The lithium destined for their factories now awaits African processing. The oil they counted on is redirected, and they ask themselves, what went wrong? What changed? How did the people we once controlled slip through our fingers? What changed, my brothers and sisters, is consciousness. What changed is courage. What changed is unity. For the first time in generations, our leaders have looked not to the West for instruction but to their own people for inspiration. For the first time, the Sahel has said, we are enough. For the first time, our nations have put aside fear and chosen destiny. Do not think this decision came lightly, for such a declaration is not without consequence. Already, threats are whispered, sanctions are drafted, propaganda is being prepared. The West will attempt to paint us as reckless, as dangerous, as unstable. They will say we are sabotaging the global economy, that we are risking chaos, that we are not ready to manage such responsibility. But let us remember, when they took our resources, was it responsible? When they enslaved our ancestors, was it stable? When they imposed unfair trade terms, was it just? No, and so we reject their lectures, for history has already exposed their hypocrisy. The truth is this: the collapse they fear is not of Africa, but of their own illusion of control. The West is not trembling because Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger will suffer. The West is trembling because they know their time of easy exploitation is over. They are trembling because they must now face a new world where Africa negotiates not as beggars but as builders. They are trembling because they realize that if 3 nations can take this step, 20 can follow. If the Sahel can rise, so can the Congo, so can Nigeria, so can Ghana, so can South Africa, so can the entire continent. And so, this ban is not just an economic policy. It is a political earthquake. It is a cultural revolution. It is a spiritual awakening. It is the voice of Africa declaring, we are awake, we are alive, we are sovereign. But my brothers and sisters, let us not think the battle is won. The ban is the beginning, not the end. What will matter most is what we do with this new control, for control without preparation can become chaos, and sovereignty without responsibility can collapse. We must be vigilant, we must be wise, we must be disciplined. Let us build industries that process our own gold into jewelry, our own uranium into energy, our own cotton into fabric, our own oil into fuel, our own lithium into batteries. Let us train our youth not only to dig but to design, not only to harvest but to manufacture, not only to sell but to innovate. Let us create African banks that finance African dreams, African corporations that dominate African markets, African universities that produce African solutions. This is what the ban means. Not starvation, not collapse, but rebirth. For too long, our economies have been shaped like funnels, wide at the bottom where resources flow in, narrow at the top where wealth escapes. But now we must reshape our economies into circles, where wealth circulates among our people, where production creates jobs, where exports are finished goods commanding respect on the global stage. I tell you this with conviction. The West is collapsing not because Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger have declared a ban, but because their centuries-old system of exploitation has met its match. The collapse is not of Africa, but of an unjust order that assumed Africa would never awaken. And so let us celebrate this moment. Let us mark it as the day when history turned. Let us tell our children and our children's children that on this day, the sons and daughters of the Sahel rose up and said, "No more, my brothers and sisters. We are only at the beginning. The journey ahead will be long. It will be hard, it will demand sacrifice, but it is a journey worth taking. For dignity is worth more than gold, sovereignty worth more than oil, unity worth more than uranium. The world may not yet understand, but we understand. The world may not yet believe, but we believe, and belief, when joined with action, changes the world. My brothers and sisters, as we reflect on the courage of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, we must now lift our eyes beyond the Sahel and gaze upon the world that trembles at this decision. For this is not merely an African story. It is a global earthquake. This is not merely the decision of 3 nations. It is the unraveling of an entire order that was built on our backs and sustained by our silence. Look to Europe, once the imperial center of the world, see how they stir in panic. In Paris, in Brussels, in Berlin, in London, there are late-night meetings, there are crisis summits, there are frantic calls For the ravines of Africa that once fed their industries are now closed, and they face the unthinkable. Factories without inputs, energy without fuel, markets without supply. The uranium of Niger that once powered their nuclear plants lies beyond their reach. The gold of Mali that once secured their banks is no longer flowing. The cotton of Burkina Faso that once clothed their workers is stopped. And suddenly, Europe that once boasted of stability feels the ground shaking beneath it. And across the ocean, in Washington and New York, there too the tremors are felt. The strategists who built their global dominance on controlling the resources of Africa are unsettled. Their corporations whisper warnings of shortages, of rising prices, of disrupted markets. Their investors panic as supply chains once taken for granted begin to fracture. And their leaders, accustomed to dictating to Africa what is permissible, now face the bitter truth that Africa has spoken in its own voice, without permission, without apology. Yes, my brothers and sisters, the world is witnessing what they never thought possible. The collapse not of Africa, but of the arrogant illusion that Africa belongs to them. The West, which imagined itself eternal, now faces the cracks in its own foundations. They spoke of globalization, but their globalization was only another word for exploitation. They spoke of partnership, but their partnerships were contracts written in chains. They spoke of development, but their development was built upon our underdevelopment. Now that system falters, and they ask themselves, how will we survive without Africa's endless stream of cheap resources? And let us be clear, it is not only the West that trembles, the entire global market trembles. For Africa is not a corner of the world, it is the heart of the world. Africa's resources are the lifeblood of the modern economy. Without Africa's cobalt, there are no batteries. Without Africa's uranium, there is no nuclear energy. Without Africa's gold, there is no financial stability. Without Africa's oil, there is no industrial machine. Without Africa's cotton, there are no garments for millions. The world depends on Africa far more than Africa depends on the world, but this truth has long been hidden under the shadow of manipulation. Now it stands exposed, undeniable, and terrifying to those who built empires on our silence. But brothers and sisters, let us not imagine that their panic will be passive. No, they will fight back. Already, the whispers of sanctions gather like dark clouds. Already, the threat of military intervention lingers in the corridors of their war rooms. Already, the weapons of propaganda are sharpened, calling us dictators, rebels, extremists, anything but sovereign nations. Already, they seek to divide us, to bribe our neighbors, to infiltrate our movements, to break our unity before it grows too powerful. We must be ready. We must be vigilant. For when a giant begins to fall, it does not fall quietly. The West will resist its collapse with every tool at its disposal. But know this: no weapon, no sanction, no lie can defeat a people united in purpose, disciplined in vision, and determined to control their destiny. And let us remember, we are not alone. For as Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger stand, so too do voices across Africa rise in support, from Ghana to Senegal, from the Congo to Tanzania, from South Africa to Nigeria. Whispers grow into roars. Why should we, too, not ban raw exports? Why should we not demand that our cocoa becomes chocolate before it leaves our shores? Why should we not demand that our oil becomes fuel before it is shipped abroad? Why should we not demand that our timber becomes furniture, our cobalt becomes technology, our diamonds become jewelry crafted by our own hands? The example of the Sahel ignites the imagination of the continent, and the West knows this. They fear not only the loss of three nations' resources, but the possibility of a domino effect, a chain reaction that sweeps across Africa until the entire continent has shut its gates to exploitation. And in that fear, they reveal the truth. Africa's weakness was never in its resources, but in its disunity. Africa's power lies not in what lies beneath its soil, but in how it chooses to control it. My brothers and sisters, imagine for a moment what this unity could mean. Imagine Africa no longer shipping cocoa beans to Europe, but chocolate bars to the world. Imagine Africa no longer sending crude oil to foreign refineries, but fuel, plastics, and chemicals from African factories. Imagine Africa no longer exporting raw lithium, but batteries that power electric vehicles across the globe. Imagine Africa not as a supplier of raw materials, but as a hub of finished goods, of innovation, of technology, of industry. This is not a dream, it is the logical outcome of sovereignty. This is the future that begins with the ban. But sovereignty demands sacrifice. It will not come without struggle. For as we close the gates to exploitation, we must open the gates to responsibility. We must invest in our own industries, build our own refineries, establish our own factories, strengthen our own education systems, and train our own engineers. We must replace dependency with self-reliance, charity with productivity, handouts with hard work. We must understand that sovereignty is not given, it is built, it is defended, it is sustained by discipline. And in this discipline, we will discover a new dignity. For too long, our youth have fled across deserts and seas in search of opportunities abroad, believing that only in foreign lands can dreams be realized. But with sovereignty, we can say to them, "Stay, for your future is here. Stay, for the factories will rise. Stay, for the fields will prosper. Stay, for the universities will innovate. Stay, for Africa is awakening." Brothers and sisters, the collapse of the West is not merely their problem, it is our opportunity. For every empire that falls creates space for new nations to rise. When Rome collapsed, Europe was reborn. When colonialism collapsed, nations emerged. Now, as the empire of exploitation begins to crumble, Africa has the chance not merely to survive, but to lead. Yes, lead. For let no one deceive us, Africa is not destined to be a follower, a pupil, a beggar. Africa is destined to be a leader, a teacher, a builder of civilization. Our resources are unmatched, our youth are unbroken, our cultures are rich, our potential is limitless. If we choose unity, if we choose courage, if we choose discipline, Africa will not only liberate itself, it will guide the world into a new order where justice replaces greed, partnership replaces exploitation, and dignity replaces humiliation. But leadership requires vision, and that vision must be larger than mere survival. We must not only say no to exploitation, we must say yes to transformation. We must not only ban raw exports, we must create industries that inspire. We must not only resist the West, we must build alliances with the East, with the South, with each other, until Africa is part of a new global balance not defined by domination, but by mutual respect. And already, that balance begins to shift. Nations in Asia, in Latin America, in the Middle East look to Africa with new eyes. They see in us not merely suppliers, but partners. They see the courage of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger and say, "Here is a continent that is ready to rise." They extend their hands not to dictate, but to cooperate. And we must seize these hands wisely, ensuring that new partnerships do not become old exploitations, that new friends do not become new masters. For in the end, our destiny is in our own hands. We cannot replace Western chains with Eastern chains. We cannot exchange one dependency for another. True sovereignty means standing on our own feet, making our own choices, building our own future. Partnerships may assist us, but only unity will save us. So let the West tremble, let the markets panic, let the prophets of doom cry of collapse. For this collapse is not ours, it is theirs. This pain is not our curse, it is their consequence. The world they built on our suffering is ending, and a new world, built on our sovereignty, is beginning. And if we remain steadfast, if we remain united, if we remain disciplined, then the collapse of the West will mark not the end of Africa's story, but the glorious beginning of its true chapter. Brothers and sisters, as we stand at the edge of this historic turning point, let us remind ourselves that collapse is not destruction alone. Collapse is transformation. Collapse is the breaking of one order so that another may rise. And the collapse of the West is not the end of the world. It is the end of their world, the end of a system that for centuries thrived on our humiliation, on our subjugation, on our silence. For too long we have been told that our fate is tied to theirs, that without their approval, their loans, their aid, their markets, we cannot live. But now, by the bold decision of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, the chains of dependency are cracking. The world begins to see what we have always known, that the heartbeat of the modern economy lies not in Europe, not in America, but in Africa. And as we reclaim control of what is ours, the illusion of their superiority crumbles. Do not mistake me. The struggle ahead will be fierce. The West will not surrender its grip willingly. They will attempt to punish us with sanctions, isolate us with propaganda, intimidate us with threats, destabilize us with covert plots. They will call us reckless. They will call us radicals. They will call us dreamers disconnected from reality. But history has always belonged to those who dream beyond the limits imposed on them. History has always honored the rebels, the revolutionaries, the builders who dared to say no to the old order and yes to the birth of something new. And so, my people, we must hold the line. We must prepare our industries to absorb the shock of change. We must redirect our trade routes to those who respect us. We must strengthen our education to produce the scientists, the engineers, the thinkers who will build the Africa of tomorrow. We must train our armies not merely for defense, but for the discipline to guard sovereignty without being lured into corruption. We must inspire our youth not with despair, but with the certainty that their generation will inherit a free Africa, an Africa that produces, an Africa that leads. Let the farmers of Mali know that their cotton will no longer be shipped to Europe to be woven into luxury fabrics while they remain poor. It will be transformed at home into clothing for Africa and the world. Let the miners of Niger know that their uranium will no longer be sold for pennies to light the cities of Europe while they sit in darkness. It will power African homes, African industries, African cities. Let the workers of Burkina Faso know that their gold will no longer be hoarded in foreign banks. It will secure African economies, African schools, African futures. This is more than economics, it is dignity. This is more than trade, it is sovereignty. This is more than strategy, it is destiny. For if Africa cannot stand tall now, after centuries of suffering, then when will it stand? If we cannot unite now, when the chains are breaking, then when will we unite? If we cannot rise now, when the old order is falling, then when will we rise? The collapse of the West is not the tragedy they want us to believe, it is the opportunity they most fear. It is the chance for Africa to finally shake off the dust of exploitation and walk upright into the Council of Nations. It is the chance for Africa to show the world not only what it produces, but what it envisions, what it builds, what it inspires. Yes, brothers and sisters, the road will be long. Yes, sacrifices will be demanded. Yes, mistakes will be made. But no sacrifice is greater than the sacrifice already paid by generations enslaved, colonized, exploited, and silenced. No price is heavier than the price we already bore when our children were stolen, when our lands were seized, when our voices were drowned out. Compared to that long night, the struggle ahead is but the dawn before the day. So let us not tremble. Let us not retreat. Let us not be seduced by the false comfort of returning to old chains. Let us instead walk forward knowing that each step we take is a step toward freedom, a step toward dignity. A step toward a future where no African child will be told that his land is poor, that his people are weak, that his destiny is to serve another. The collapse of the West will echo through history, but let the echo that endures be not their fall, but our rise. Let it be said that when the empires of exploitation began to crumble, Africa did not beg, Africa did not bow, Africa did not break, Africa stood, Africa built, Africa led. And so I call upon every African nation, join this wave. Do not watch from the sidelines as history is written. Do not let fear rob you of your place in destiny. Stand with Burkina Faso, stand with Mali, stand with Niger, stand with Africa. Let cocoa be chocolate, let oil be fuel, let lithium be batteries, let iron be steel, let diamonds be jewelry crafted by African hands. Let no raw material leave this continent untransformed, unvalued, unclaimed. To the youth of Africa, this is your hour. The struggle of your ancestors was to survive chains. The struggle of your parents was to survive poverty. Your struggle will be to build prosperity, to create industries, to innovate technologies, to redefine Africa's place in the world. Do not run from this task, embrace it. Do not look abroad. For salvation, look within. For the power you seek is not in foreign lands, it is in your hands, in your minds, in your unity. To the leaders of Africa, this is your test. Do not betray it with greed. Do not weaken it with corruption. Do not delay it with cowardice. Rise to the level of history. For history is watching, and it will not forgive betrayal. And 2. The world beyond Africa, let this be understood. We are not withdrawing from humanity, we are reclaiming our humanity. We are not rejecting trade, we are rejecting exploitation. We are not collapsing the world, we are building a new one, fairer, freer, more balanced. Walk with us in respect, and together we will prosper. Resist us, and you will only exhaust yourselves against the tide of history. So what happens next, my brothers and sisters? What happens next is that Africa rises. What happens next is that Africa unites. What happens next is that Africa breaks free. And when generations to come ask what we did in this moment, let them say, we chose courage over fear, dignity over dependency, unity over division. Let them say, we stood when others thought we would kneel. Let them say, we built when others thought we would collapse. Let them say, we lit a torch that no darkness could extinguish. The West may collapse, but Africa will not. Africa will endure, Africa will transform, Africa will lead. And in that truth, in that destiny, in that unshakable conviction, I say to you, forward ever, backward never. May God bless Burkina Faso. May God bless Mali. May God bless Niger.